The mysterious and enigmatic history of mankind has been a grand journey from nothing to infinity. Religions have created dozens of different beliefs on the subject, while science has proposed thousands of different theories. The first society, the first evolution, the first civilization, the first state. But we have forgotten one important detail. What about the first man? After terms like Adam's trace, Adam's map and Enki calendar, we now have what we call Adam's calendar. When you hear the name, don't think of it as a tangible calendar. Archaeology has given it this name because of its significance. Adam's calendar, one of the most important archaeological discoveries to date, was found in the vast cliffs of South Africa. Estimated to be 100,000 years old and consisting of numerous stones, many questions remain unanswered about Adam's calendar. The process of discovering this site was indeed quite serendipitous. We owe the discovery of Adam's calendar to İLHAN, a semi-professional pilot who does free flights, who happened to fly over the site and concluded, these cannot be random piles of stones, and then reported it to the archaeological units. After this discovery in 2003, this site in the remote lands of South Africa, called Adam's Calendar, became another focal point of scientific interest after Göbekli Tepe. Although we humans have known about this valuable site since 2003, Adam's Calendar was well known to local South African shamans. Mentioned frequently in these millennia-old beliefs, it even became a temple point for native tribes, known locally as the birthplace of the sun. The site was actually referred to as the place where Adam was born. This terminology was not used to mean the sun, but rather sun or Adam's son. In our beautiful Turkish language, the term Ademoglu means the place where Adam was born. Thus, for thousands of years, the thousands of tribes and shamans living in these lands called this site the place where God created man, Adam. Historians and archaeologists who have had access to this information have named this ancient site Adam's Calendar, meaning the starting point of Adam. Now, let's look at the information we have. A semi-professional pilot notices an ancient site during a flight, realizes it's not just random rocks, and reports it to archaeologists. Research begins, revealing an ancient site that has lain dormant for thousands of years. So far, so good. But what exactly is Adam's Calendar? Adam's Calendar lies on the edge of the Barberton Valley, perched on the edge of a 300-meter cliff. It is also a region rich in various fossils and gold mines, as previous research has shown. These studies tell us that the presence of marine sand deposits in this area is due to the fact that the Barberton Valley has been covered for thousands of years. Although we don't know for sure, the main reason we have only recently discovered Adam's Calendar, numerous ancient gold mines and hundreds of fossils, may be that the Earth has protected its history to prevent us from destroying it. Despite this protection, human curiosity knows no bounds. Only 15 years ago, a significant piece of stone was stolen from the site. This stone, which was crucial to the site and caused tension among the local people to the point of a possible civil war, was eventually dubbed Stoneman by researchers. Michael Tellinger, who continued his research at the site, humorously described the situation. This stone was as valuable to them as it was to us. Our only objective was to take the stone and return it to its rightful place. But the situation became so bizarre that many people in the area were willing to fight over the stone. We named it Stoneman. Fortunately, it is now at home. After the stolen Stoneman was returned to Adam's Calendar, archaeologists were finally able to see the site in its original form. These circularly arranged ancient stones, which reminded archaeologists of the belief in Tawaf, revealed the true mystery. This site was not built as the result of a religious ritual. It was an ancient, massive calendar that worked with the phases of the sun and moon, accurately calculating the equinoxes. The shadows cast by two large stones in the center of the site could mark and identify all the days of the year. Perhaps, once again, We had underestimated the primitiveness of human history. But why a calendar? Why would primitive man need to construct a calendar? Research tells us that this calendar still works to some extent. Despite axis shifts and landslides that have shifted the stone slightly, this calendar remains highly accurate today. This information hinted at much more within this site. In fact, the primary purpose of this site was much more significant. As research continued, many different archaeologists wrote hundreds of papers about this region. Yes, it was still an accurate solar calendar, but the elements it contained were far beyond what we had imagined. Firstly, the stones that made up this calendar had been worked and carved several times, with strange drawings on them. These were not random stones. The creators of this site were masters of stone carving, as well as a stone carved in the shape of a sphinx and representing a mammal. There were bird hieroglyphs, known in other cultures as Horus, representing the southern and western edges of this site. These stones, called Sphinx and Horus, were much older and more eroded than the originals. When these carvings were first made, they were detailed and required great skill, similar to the Sphinx in Egypt and the Horus bird in mythological hieroglyphs. After thousands of years, however, these carvings eroded away, leaving only their silhouettes. Although we have not yet solved the mysteries of the southern and western borders, we now know what they symbolize. The remaining edges are to the north and east. Archaeologists have focused their research on these two directions and discovered an ancient tomb on the northern edge. This tomb, buried under a human-like stone silhouette, led us to a very specific address, Anunnaki. It was now definitively known that the northern part of Adam's calendar was rewarded with a tomb. As investigations continued on the northern side, another fortuitous discovery was made. Looking north from Adam's calendar, there was a hill with a single tree at the top, seemingly inviting visitors to the northern side. This tree, located on a hill about 2 kilometers from the site, prompted archaeologists to investigate further, leading to surprising results. Of course, a tree planted by them thousands of years ago could not survive to this day. Perhaps they knew this and built a stone altar to keep the trees growing for thousands of years. This stone altar, carved by human hands and located 2 kilometers from the site, could no longer be a coincidence. The tree on the opposite hill undoubtedly symbolized the ancient tomb on the northern edge. Radar surveys showed that the ground beneath the tree had been dug up and leveled. Now the next step was clear. Return to the site and examine the symbolic tomb. Whose tomb was it? Who could be the person buried thousands of years ago in the northern part of such a mysterious and historically significant site? Was it a god or a creation of one? The most likely candidates among those who built Adam's calendar are the kingdom of Enki or the Anunnaki. They and their history are our only clue. As you know, the Anunnaki have been mentioned and written about in various cultures, including Mesopotamia. Given the age of the site, yes. The answer is now clear. In the absence of any other candidate, the Anunnaki built Adam's calendar. But did this tomb belong to them? Now let's delve into my favorite part, which resembles an infinite well. Infinite history. According to Sumerian tablets and ancient Egyptian culture, Enki, the king of the kingdom of Enki, had a son named Dumuzi. Dumuzi was Enki's youngest son. According to the Sumerian tablets, he died shortly after the flood. As you know, the Anunnaki had the technology to bring the dead back to life. They did this using vibrations and frequencies, a technology mentioned in various texts and even by Nikola Tesla. However, for different reasons in different cultures, they did not bring Dumuzi back to life. Dumuzi's lover, Inanna, could not accept his death, and according to Sumerian texts, took his body to Abzu and buried it under gold, facing east. I repeat, took him to Abzu and buried him under gold, facing east. Believe it or not, Abzu is in modern-day South Africa, as is the region where this tomb is located. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that the site is located in a region rich in ancient gold mines, just like the area where Dumuzi was buried in this mythology. And finally, Adam's calendar faces east, as stated in that repeated phrase. Could this ancient mythology be true? If it is all real, which seems likely, could the place we know as Adam's calendar really be the tomb of the ancient god? Man Dumuzi? I would like to say yes, but we need to be sure before we make such a declaration. The most realistic way to do this is through carbon dating of the stones in the tomb. Throughout the video, I have repeatedly estimated the age of the age of the age of the age of the Adam's calendar. However, after these carbon tests, the situation becomes a little strange. Why? Because initial tests indicate that the stones at Adam's calendar, which we estimated to be thousands of years old, were actually brought here from another location. These stones, formed from an alloy of many different elements, with a high gold content impossible to find naturally mixed, led to a new chapter in scientific literature. It too, a new chapter in scientific literature. Seemed impossible for people of that era to discover such an alloy, let alone use it to create a solar calendar with a space equinox connection. Yes, according to carbon tests, it is now certain that these so-called primitive people mixed elements such as gold, iron, and quartz to create a new alloy. Based on this information alone, we can estimate the age of the age of the age of the age of the age of the age of the Adam's calendar to be between 5,000 and 10,000 BC. However, according to carbon dating, it is at least 100,000 years old, the first time that science has contradicted itself. The Anunnaki mythology, previously thought to be mere legend, strongly supports this theory, as does the tomb found at the site. According to Michael Tellinger, the most significant detail that distinguishes this site from others is its undeniable metaphysical elements. Research revealed that the Adam's calendar had a 3-degree deviation. According to this calendar, the north and south longitudes were 3 degrees off from their current positions. Archaeologists and researchers suggested that this was a minor error that these quote, unquote, primitive people could easily make, but this was not the case. According to Tellinger, it was not an unconscious mistake. The Earth's magnetic north could shift by up to 3 degrees every 25,000 to 26,000 years. In addition, various branches of science had accepted that major catastrophes over these millennia had caused the Earth's magnetic axis to shift. Given the estimated age of this site, the possibility that they were wrong was very small. Let's take a break from all this jargon, testing, and research, and even from the incessant debates between historians and archaeologists. We now know that Adam's calendar is around 100,000 years old and promises us a level of technology we cannot yet fathom. Yes, these people were far more advanced than we thought. Yes, they lived in those mythical times that we thought were just stories. So what would happen if we booked a flight to South Africa and, after an 8-hour flight, visited this mysterious place? Don't worry, we won't get lost and die in strange labyrinths or traps like the pyramids. However, the moment we enter the site, the GPS on our mobile phones, the North Needle on our compasses, and other communication devices that rely on internet connections will cease to function. The 2-kilometer radius around the site remains magnetically unresolved. All devices, primitive or advanced, that rely on magnetic connections will stop working until we leave this area. Although the cause of this phenomenon is still undetermined, Adam's calendar is not the only special region where this happens. Similar special magnetic zones can be found at the pyramids of Giza, Petra, and Machu Picchu. However, these sites are well known and visited by millions of tourists every year. Why has Adam's calendar been so excluded, and why has the history buried here been hidden? Answering this question is difficult because Michael Tellinger, who has continued his research in the region with his team since 2003, stated that the local South African authorities would not allow further excavation and carbon dating. According to South African archaeologists, excavating to shed light on the story would damage the sanctity of the Adam's calendar. So we could not learn more, or our learning was somehow obstructed, and in 2016, Tellinger and his team were banned from the site. Adam's calendar had stopped and there was no new day. The Adam's calendar, estimated to have been constructed by the Anunnaki 100,000 years ago and held sacred by local shamans for thousands of years, has taught us much in just a few years. There were no significant periods called the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. For thousands of years before these ages, the people of Adam's calendar and Göbekli Tepe could map the stars according to the equinoxes, create alloys by melting elements, and most importantly, knew the world much better than we do. Michael Tellinger, who dedicated 13 years to Adam's calendar before his research was stopped, comments humorously and critically on real history, ending our video with this thought: I cannot understand why history opposes science proven by reason. The findings at Adam's calendar, Stonehenge, and Göbekli Tepe clearly refute the history taught in schools. How many thousands of years do we need to prove how thick-skinned historians are?